Welcome to Breakpoint, the ServiceNow Developer Podcast.
Hello, admins, builders, developers, and technical individuals I say with the utmost love and respect. Welcome to or welcome back to the Breakpoint Podcast, the ServiceNow Developer Podcast, here to bring you all the latest tools, tips, and tradecraft to accelerate your developer career. My name is Lauren McManamon. I am one of the senior developer advocates here at ServiceNow, but I am not the only senior developer advocate here today. This episode is not only joined by a couple of phenomenal guests that I'll be introducing here shortly, but it's also being joined as a co-host today, Laszlo Balla, also one of my teammates. Welcome to Breakpoint. How are you today?
Thanks, Lauren. I'm doing good. As Lauren mentioned, my name is Laszlo Balla. I'm also senior developer advocate here at ServiceNow. I'm the one based in EMEA, and that makes this episode especially interesting for me because we have two phenomenal guests, as Lauren mentioned, also from Germany. So I can't wait to see how this episode unfolds today. Thanks for having me, Lauren.
I really have to congratulate you, Laszlo, because it was your idea to bring on this team and talk about this topic. So I'm extremely excited to have you and this team here today. You know, you've been part of our developer advocacy team for a couple of months now. So do you want to give any short career introduction or career background before we dive into today's topic?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've been working in IT for about 20 years now. More specifically on the ServiceNow platform, the last 8 years. As so many of us, I've started in a non-technical role. Really, I was managing a department. My role was to implement a new tool for our service desk, for our customer service team. And I just fell in love with the platform and I wanted to learn more about that. So I became an admin, became a developer, eventually became an architect. And I had a journey of working for a number of customers, doing a little bit of partner work as well, and being recognized as an MVP the past 2 years, which brought me a little bit closer to the community and the work of the developer advocate team as well. So when this opportunity opened up in Europe, I took a stab at it, and I'm very happy to be here today with you all.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here, even more thrilled to have you as part of our team. It was funny, around the time of hiring too was like a little bit during Knowledge. So it was nice to get to like really kind of start collaborating at Knowledge in person. So it really kind of kicked off the teammate experience in a really awesome way. Well, don't want to wax too much poetic on the inside baseball on the developer advocacy team, because today we have a really phenomenal topic. I think there's been a lot of interesting development changes to the ServiceNow platform with regards to the tool sets that a lot of developers have been using. Obviously, AI has been like a big hot button topic and how it's changing everyone's development paradigms, et cetera. But also behind the scenes at ServiceNow, there have been some sincerely large structural changes and improvements made to handle the amount of things happening now on the ServiceNow platform. And a lot of this is possible because of today's topic matter, which is Raptor DB. You've probably heard about it. You've definitely seen some cool eagle or hawk related graphics in association with it. So Laszlo couldn't have thought of two better people to talk about today's topic, which are Thomas Richter and Luis Caroll. How are you doing today? Thank you for joining us.
Very well. Thank you very much.
Doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I would also love to hear a great introduction from you as well, and tell the listeners, what brings you here to ServiceNow to create this awesome product?
Yeah, maybe I start quickly. I'm Thomas. We started Swarm64 as a group of three many, many years ago. It's over 10 years ago. Our goal was to accelerate databases, and it really came out of a love for startups. So I've always been fascinated by technology. I've always been working on either in a technological job or in a commercial job that directly relates to technology. And at some point, I decided to enter the colorful world of startups, first working for one. And I had a fantastic CEO, learned a lot from him. And at that point, it was like, okay, you got to try that yourself. So back then I went to Berlin, which at that point in time, and probably to a degree still is, it was one of the best places to found outside the Silicon Valley. And we actually met very stereotypically. My co-founders and I met at an idea board in a co-working space. So really very, very cheesy way to meet. We had a very bold and hairy vision. We got VC financing, venture capital financing fairly early on. And then we went into changing the world of database. And it took us multiple attempts, but the last one was finally very successful. And ServiceNow saw that, and they also saw how well our approach mapped to what ServiceNow needed. And this is how the acquisition came about. So I had the privilege at that point in time, I was CEO of the company, I had the privilege to run through an acquisition with ServiceNow and to bring all the colleagues over that had been working with us. And then we were joined by a very talented team on the ServiceNow side, a lot of in-depth database knowledge. And then together in this super team, we actually then started also recruiting quite aggressively the last few years to bring in really good talent, really efficient coders, really good database experts, and to build out a big organization that is capable to handle that kind of complexity. Personally, I really enjoy spending time with my kids. I enjoy our Peloton. I do a little bit of CrossFit, although recently not as much as I should. And we love to travel together.
And I am Luis Carril. My career started almost 20 years ago too. My first half of my career was in academia, researcher, multiple topics. But at the end of it, I decided to move into the industry, and I found Swarm64 already many years after its start. And I say, okay, these people are doing something interesting. Yeah, I will take part. And I was there. I started as an engineer, as a developer, and then in 4 years afterwards is when we were acquired by ServiceNow, which was an adventure in itself. And since then, well, we have been creating this wonderful team that Thomas is talking about, and creating all this creating Raptor for all of you. Also, on a personal note, I also have 2 kids at home, 2 small ones, so it means that I no longer have any free time for anything else. But that's also wonderful in a way. We love to travel together, and still, when I still have some times, I'm really a geek, so I still love gaming, board gaming, all this kind of stuff.
Well, wonderful. So 2 extremely brilliant, driven men with 2 young families. How do you make the time for it all? Sounds like you have very, very full lives. But even more exciting is, talking about all this amazing work that you've already done on this Raptor DB product. So you've kind of teased, it revolves around databases and things like that. But I think so let's start simply with a more explain it to me like I'm 5 definition. What is Raptor DB at a product level?
So if you think of the ServiceNow platform, there is many users modifying things at the same time. You're entering data, you're modifying data. And in order to keep some sanity at the storage level, you need to have a relational database, because the wonderful thing about a relational database is it gives you a lot of consistency of when you modify records, when you store new records, when you put any sorts of queries against that data, that you get a predictable mechanism of how it will actually respond and what you can actually expect. Mm-hmm. That consistency is super valuable when you try to develop against the platform, which is one of the reasons that you have a good experience in your whole storage and persistence layer, as in anything you want to keep for the future. And what happens is ServiceNow is growing in all dimensions. So you're thinking about how many users use the platform. You're thinking about how many customers we have across our farm. But you're also thinking about how the customers are using more of our platform every day. And that more of our platform, that also has 2 dimensions. One is you have many, many more ServiceNow products. People usually enter with 1 or 2, but then they buy bigger and bigger packages, right? But at the same time, you have AI into the mix as well. So you could almost think there's 4 different ways in how the usage of the platform is constantly expanding. And when that was kind of a silver streak on the horizon, so to say, ServiceNow decided we need to invest in our platform technology. We need to invest specifically into our data layer and into the database. And there was a longer process to look at all sorts of technologies. And we were, in a way, very lucky that what we had built mapped very nicely to ServiceNow. And we had built this with a vision to have an extremely versatile database solution, where you have to make less decisions up front and you can have more versatility during your day-to-day operation of the database. And we'll get to what that versatility means in a moment. But that means that Raptor is a response to ServiceNow seeing a steady growth across all the dimensions, from more customers across the farm, customers doing more, customers having more users, and AI coming on top. And we basically need to handle so many more transactions every second, both little modifications as well as reading small and large sets of data out of the platform. And that's what we enable.
Now, one thing I would like to kind of expand upon is what does that physically differ from or how does that expand upon the existing database model or structure that ServiceNow has used up until this point? Because like you said, it's been very noticeable, like how much the company has grown as far as transactions, whether it's just products or now within AI. So how is that physically different?
So our vision at Swarm, and that's kind of what we are now able to supercharge at ServiceNow, was that you're usually starting using a database to make many small modifications. You have thousands or 10,000 of users making very many small interactions. Hey, I need to update this field. I need to store this new record, etc. But what you also want to do more and more is to look at the global picture. You want to say, hey, I want to understand all the cases opened in a certain window, grouped by geography. And then you may want to drill deeper, add additional layers of analysis on top. You may want an AI to be able to do that. When the AI does it, it will bombard your system because it will, do it multiple times. It will just try and it will say, hey, I can dig deeper. And it can do that at the speed of a computer and not of a human being. And so it's super important to have that ability to, on the one side, be still very good in these small transactions that happen all the time, but also be able to crunch very large amounts of data. So our existing model was very much in that first camp, the ability to transact, the ability to store data and retrieve data reliably. But it was lacking the ability to run super large dashboards and so on. It was lacking the ability to drill into your data, slice it and dice it across multiple dimensions, aggregate big chunks of data. And that's the kind of value we brought in. But at the same time, we kind of also brought in a little bit of a proof of principle of extensibility. We are building on one of the most popular open source databases, which is called Postgres. And Postgres has always been extremely expandable. And what we've done is we've expanded Postgres in the domain of analytics and hybrid transactional analytical processing, which is this mix between the two cases I was talking about. But that extensibility also allows us to do more. And one example I'll give now is we also did a lot of work recently on the transactional side of things to make that even better. So we are constantly expanding along both of those dimensions, but what I'll comment later when we talk a little bit about the roadmap in the future, we're also going beyond that.
So metaphorically, you could kind of compare this to, from a developer standpoint, something that they might be exposed to a little bit is like reporting versus performance analytics, right? Reporting can kind of give you here's all of your data, and I can kind of run a report on how it currently is. But, performance analytics can dive much deeper into snapshots of it over time and how those things can, transcend into much smaller levels. And so that would be a type of technology that this type of database model would really excel at obviously at like a much larger level, but that's kind of what it's doing data-wise. It's not necessarily just taking a look at things as they currently are, but has the capacity to drill deeper into things over time and do so in a quick manner.
Yeah, and actually, it's not just Raptor, not just accelerate standard reports, but specifically performance analytics, Lauren, it becomes much, much better with thanks to Raptor. And actually, our friends of performance analytics, thanks to the speed and scalability and new technology that Raptor comes in, they have been able to develop a new data model that allow the customer to have to track a lot of changes in a fine grain and allow them to do the analysis afterwards. This is called data snapshots, and allow the customer after the fact to decide how to do the breakdowns much more freely than before. Before they have certain limitations, but now thanks to RaptorDB and performance analytics data snapshots, the customers have much more flexibility on how they build and they analyze their indicators.
It's actually so fascinating when I hear these stories of teams collaborating and one team's work enabling another team to pivot to something else. So essentially, just translating it to layman language, basically, the system can work differently than how it was able to. It has certain limitations, and you're enabling it to be able to do things it was not able to do before, or maybe you needed to export your data and use external systems and databases for all of that. While at the same time, obviously, we want our customers to use more of ServiceNow with more of their organization, and then put AI on top of this, where it's like suddenly having hundreds of users that are constantly going through your data nonstop. It's fascinating to think about how Raptor enables all of that and some.
And this is a super interesting topic you're bringing up there, because we want to also allow to run complex queries more on the ServiceNow platform directly, so you can have the real data, the fresh data, and you do not have to materialize it multiple times, as in store it in multiple places, go through the entire trouble of keeping things up to date. And that's also why we are continuously expanding, and we can probably talk about this a little bit in the roadmap section as well, but while we're continuously expanding the ability to take traffic from multiple sources of multiple degrees of intensity, you could say, and very different shapes, as in your tiny transaction updating a very small value somewhere, that's a write transaction that makes it a little bit more complicated, but it's teeny tiny. And on the other hand, you have your big request coming from the outside world, right? Maybe someone wanting a whole bit of data being exported or being available for a dashboard. And those need to somehow be parallelized and also kind of prioritized against each other. So this is an area where we've done a lot of investment and where we will continue to invest. There is beauty in storing things in one place. And that's been very much the vision here, because whenever you duplicate things into many, many, many directions, it is such a nightmare to keep data current.
Yeah.
And I think that's the platform value. And Raptor is our ability to not be bottlenecked by size, not be bottlenecked by performance and processing power.
And that's a very, very important learning for any architect out there. So if I put my architect hat back on, it's like suddenly you're able to give different answers to those same questions where, like you said, there's I don't know, different requests or bigger requests to process data. You were able to give a certain answer to those business requirements before, and suddenly Raptor is enabling you to go about that differently. So you might want to go back and rethink some of those previous solutions as well. It's pretty good.
Actually, Laszlo, that's also an important call to our developers, that if you want to leverage Raptor, you have to try to think on letting the database execute the data pipeline. So ServiceNow platform is very flexible, and Java or JavaScript developer, you might be tempted to bring a lot of data into the layer that you control and do processing there. And at the end, most of the times, that is less efficient for you, for the whole health of the instance, than if you try to really push down the processing to the bottom of the layer, because the database is going to be much more efficient doing some aggregation, doing filtering, than if you are moving in and out large number of rows. So it's really,
it's very interesting.
Yeah. So really now I recommend always to think, to review. We have a lot of cases where people comes out with saying, well, where is the bottleneck? And unfortunately, the bottleneck is not always in the database, which means that unfortunately there is not a single solution for all the problems.
But that's important. Yeah, as developers and architects, we've been obsessed for years about optimizing our queries and all that. And that's probably not going away, but it's going to look different, like you said. So whatever you're able to process on the application layer versus what you can push to database may change. You may get different results. And at the end of the day, scripts can look different too, because those things that used to be important in the past maybe are not that important anymore, or we do things differently now, like filtering and aggregations. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in the long term when more and more customers get Raptor.
And I also want to highlight we're at the beginning of the journey. So a lot of the things we do are exposed internally, of course, but they're not yet exposed through all the layers. So I would personally, and this is just my personal opinion, this is not revealing any secrets, but I would personally expect that over time, there is going to be more ability to execute deeper in the stack, as in execute at the source, and then be able to, for example, get a pre-aggregate, as Luis was talking about. Having said that, there's also always one red thread that runs through everything, and that is we are obsessed with security. We have our advanced
Good
security.
thing to be obsessed with.
So that is something that we also like. There's a like there's always a trade-off between security and what you can enable, and so how far that goes is also always depending on the security model. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But yeah, we are very very focused at work, exploring all sorts of different ways in how you can make the most of your ServiceNow data, or in how your AI agents and AI-driven mechanisms can make most of your data.
Has the rise in interest in AI contributed to the prioritization of getting your team, resources and the kind of the featuring it deserves because it's so reliant upon this new model? Or how has that changed? I think it's very interesting from our customers to kind of learn a little bit how the sausage is made. And so, we announced Raptor, I believe it was 1 or 2 years ago at Knowledge. It was kind
Last
of like a
year,
big
maybe?
last year. And
Yes.
so, how is that rollout gone behind the scenes, or have things changed in priority now that AI is such a hot button topic?
So definitely, let me first answer the AI part, and then we'll come a little bit to the history of how we came about and how it's rolling out. It is definitely an important consideration, because if you think that you already have maybe thousands or 10,000s of users on your platform, and then you have all the AI activities that can easily double or triple the amount of load. So that is really an important factor. And you do want all your processes to run efficiently. You want your users to have a good experience. You want your AI agents to not be bottlenecked. So that's definitely a key driver. And what the other part, there's kind of a second element to that, and that is the more data ServiceNow can, in one shape or form, access, the better the decisions will be made, right?
Correct.
Like there is a correlation between the data availability and the quality of your agents, the quality of AI processes, and so on. And that's why we're investing in many areas, not just in the Raptor area, but things like workflow data fabric and so on, to really allow people to kind of branch out that network, both tapping into internal data sources. But what we in Raptor are also doing is removing any scaling bottlenecks from bringing data into the platform. So that's kind of the AI angle of it. Now, let me quickly talk about Knowledge 2024, when Raptor was getting the big announcement. It was in one of the keynotes, which was, of course, fantastic to see that come to life. And we were about 6 weeks before the show, and we had an internal name for the project, and we also had a official kind of marketing name that was very clunky. And then basically it became pretty clear that we needed a clear name, like one name for the whole thing. And what's interesting is Bill actually stepped in, or CEO stepped in and said, wait a second, like I envisage like an aggressive bird, a really fast bird aggressively going in and just, solving your problems, doing it. And so that's how Raptor came about. And then there was also a little bit of a education. That's the bird, not the dinosaur.
Yes.
Raptor being Latin for like a bird of prey or a predator in general, didn't make it easy, because it definitely has a lot of different connotations and names. But in this case, yes, it's definitely the bird, and that's why we went for all sorts of bird pictures in our internal presentations and externally as well. So,
well, fun fact,
this
when
is
we were talking about it at the developer level, there was some presentation I was working on that covered RaptorDB as like a new product, but a lot of the graphics, like the graphics with eagles and hawks, were not available yet. And so I personally didn't know which it was. And I remember doing this whole graphic with, I think it was literally just screen caps from Jurassic Park. And I think it was my boss is like, it's the birds, right? I was like, obviously not. Obviously, I didn't know it was the bird. So, hey, a nice linguistic lesson and also a nice branding lesson for everybody. So, but I think the name, it's Bill ordained. I think it really represents the power, like you said, behind the product as well. I couldn't think of a better one. Very cool.
When the keynote was live, I took a screenshot of the slide where it was first announced, because I hadn't seen it myself. This is like
you hadn't seen
executive level keynote. Like
That's true.
I'm not in the circles where I'm being briefed on this. So I took a screenshot and I sent it to our team, and our project manager for the whole Raptor project actually used that screenshot. And I think for all the presentations we had the next 2 years, that screenshot was always our cover page. So it's kind of a little bit of, So this is how we overcome our shortage of eagle photos.
Hey, honestly, as someone that's worked on the smaller of the 4 keynotes, the CreatorCon keynote, the amount of those graphic designers at the helm, I'm like, man, I wish you were always on board. These are great stuff. I'd use
just
it
half
too.
of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any other names? Are you aware of any other names that didn't make the cut for the final product?
Many. Many.
Many.
Anything you can share.
I think it's not secret. We have a bunch of internal names that we were cycling through, like Tembo, which means elephant, which was part of a series of projects with, I think it was in Swahili, if I remember correctly. And we have several projects, all with Swahili names. So I was an elephant because an elephant is the mascot of PostgreSQL, which is what we're based on. I think we tried several others. Just Swarm64, keeping the old name from the startup. Several combinations of Postgres, ServiceNow, now, and so we have many discussions about it.
Hey, as long as it doesn't have the word studio in it, people are happy.
So first up, maybe talking about, I'm a customer. How do I get access to RaptorDB? What are even my options? Anything I can do? I suppose we didn't really talk about it. It's different versions of Raptor, Standard and Pro. I think it'd be good to understand what the differences are. And as a customer, what can I do to evaluate, make a decision? Can I order it? What are my options as a customer?
So Raptor is a product line. So essentially we have one paid commercial version of Raptor and one basic version of Raptor with some features that make the difference. But the basic version is still great. So our goal is to bring the basic version to all our customer base. And the basic version, we are rolling out automatically. There's not too much that we recommend. There's no need for the customers to request it. Today, around 1/3 of our customers are already onboarded on Raptor, and we will continue in the upcoming years. RaptorDB Pro is really where you notice the power in the dashboards, the power on the really very large use cases, and that is a paid option. And for that, my recommendation is to go to your account team and tell, we're having performance problems, or we want to grow, or we want to onboard this other application, this other use case, and really think we should also preemptively or consider discuss this with ServiceNow. And basically how you go about it. Raptor Pro, you will then have also a more we will take your hand to get into it, because larger customer, it's always we want to be sure that there are no regressions, but this is essentially how you go about it.
Do you happen to have an example of what would elicit choosing Raptor Pro over the standard model, like whether it's a customer story or a specific project size example to help people give the best recommendation?
And this up today, okay? Today, in 6 months, Raptor Pro feature set is going to expand, so there will be more considerations. But today, our recommendations is: do you love performance analytics? But you need more. Do you love vulnerability response? But you need to support more vulnerable items, like 20, 30, 50 million vulnerable items or more. Is your instance already on 8, 9, 10 terabytes of data or even more? Your QPS is maybe beyond 15 or beyond 20. There are several factors, and a lot of them correlate. Usually, the larger the storage footprint, also the higher the throughput of the customer, and these are indicators what we use to recommend Raptor Pro.
And you also mentioned too that this is, kind of slowly rolling out automatically. It's something that is progressively being debuted. I will say though, sometimes it's hard at the developer level. Sometimes those notifications happen, but sometimes maybe at the developer level, it's not as obvious. If that's already happened, maybe performance-wise, they're like, man, this thing is ripping real. Have we already been upgraded? So is there an easy way for someone with developer access to check if they've already been provisioned with Raptor DB?
Yeah, I would say this is an interesting one. So if we do our job really well, you will actually not really notice, other than that things are going to be a little bit faster.
True.
Because the goal of Raptor Standard is really, you have a very solid, stable platform. We can kind of continually expand and be ready for the scale that ever increases. But Raptor Standard is really has the objective to also be very non-disruptive. So it would almost be kind of contra our original goal to make it a big difference. So if you have a big bang, that is probably because someone in the organization has made the decision to invest in Raptor Pro. Raptor Standard will still give you utility, and things will get easier, but it's not going to be as eye-opening. And that's very much intentional, because we do not want to disrupt anyone. This is a big part of what we've been working at, and why it is so important to really own this database stack ourselves. We invested also a lot into backward compatibility. I mentioned earlier that we have kind of, as part of this mechanism that we built, we have proven the extensibility of our platform, of our database platform. And one part of that is we've also massively extended it to make sure that things that used to work still keep working. That was actually a large part of the migration preparation that we did. So performance, super important to us, but also let's migrate without any disruption. And we've been very successful. We've now done thousands and thousands and thousands of migrations, and not disrupting the business as a process. So your gains will be subtle. You will not have some kind of big bang that you'll suddenly find. But at the same time, also, we have no good end user tool to see if you're on Raptor Standard. That's so far the question hasn't presented itself. That's why we haven't invested. There's ways to kind of find it out, but it is very much in the weeds. So we don't have anything that is like a button on a page or a status message in the platform.
Are you saying, do I understand you correctly, that the worst thing that can happen is that things are gonna go just a little faster than before?
The worst thing that can happen. So for us, the objective is very, very clear. You have a farm with an incredible quantity of customers and a much higher quantity of servers, because as we all know, there's not only the prod environment where you run your production, but there's also all your developer environments. There is all the environments you're using for testing, et cetera, right? So if you think about it, we have our customer base, but then we have many more instances, because everybody wants to test, everyone wants to develop, and so on. If you're looking at that scale, you do not want nasty surprises. So this is one where we've very heavily invested in. So yeah, from that angle, absolutely. Now, Raptor Standard will also give you benefits, and it will also make the world a bit faster. But you always have to remember there's a whole platform happening.
Mm-hmm.
So there is always it's like let's say a gin tonic. If you drink the gin neat, you'll probably notice more of a difference than when you pour the tonic into it. So
I should try that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I should try that.
Yeah, I'm not a big gin drinker, so for me it would probably be more like Scotch. But Scotch and Coke will really make it much harder for me to tell how good the Scotch is. So in other words, there's always an element of platform that will take its time because there's a lot of processing happening there. Probably some of it written by you, right? The listeners to this show. And when you want to have something really dramatic, that's where Raptor Pro comes in, where the super heavy queries that take a very significant amount of time then get accelerated very strongly. And this is usually where, as an end user, you see, like, you will not notice a difference between 1 and 2 milliseconds, not in a whole stack where it takes your browser to render the page and so on and to bring up our platform, right? You will not notice millisecond differences. However, if you have a dashboard and it runs on the existing platform before you went to Raptor Standard, it maybe ran within a minute. That's a little bit, takes a good amount of time and patience, right? To wait for a minute until your dashboard pops up. And then you go to Raptor Standard, and then it's like 30 seconds. You'll notice that.
Yes.
But then you go to Raptor Pro and it's like 5 seconds. You'll notice that a lot. So that's why the difference between the 1 minute to 30 seconds and maybe a little bit of time for rendering everything in your browser and so on, right? That's not going to be so dramatic, but going from 1 minute to 5 seconds, that's dramatic. And this is kind of why the standard migrations, I don't want to put the expectations sky high for standard migrations, Raptor standard. That's all. I just want to be really honest here. But it is stable. It is we're spending an incredible amount of time making sure it plays really nicely with the platform. And it is the foundation of Raptor Pro as well. So it gets a lot of attention. And so that's why if you're on standard, that's great. If you're not yet on standard, not the end of the world, but you will be soon. If you can be on Pro, that's awesome if your data cases demand it.
And like you said, it's a compounding issue, or it's a compounding success. The vast majority of actions that a developer is taking on the ServiceNow platform, like you said, already happen in a few milliseconds, whether it's a page loading or a report loading or so on and so forth. But, if you are, something as simple as, like, internally, we have a version of ServiceNow called Surf. And on Surf, Surf is it's one of the oldest instances of ServiceNow at our entire company. And even a couple of times, I had visited the page recently, and there used to be these records with an ungodly amount of related lists attached to them. And historically, it would take, a couple of seconds for it to quote unquote warm up. And now they just load. And so it's things like that where, I don't have to visit that page all the time, definitely not every day, but, that's a great example of, that thing that used to be an inconvenience is removed. And I never even noticed the upgrade. So the fact that the entire upgrade happened didn't disrupt any of the actions I was already doing and only remove the annoyances does show its value at the standard level. And then, of course, at the pro level. So that's really remarkable.
And Thomas
Luis,
mentioned,
you got a fantastic story about the move to BT1,
Yes.
right? Like build BT1, Build Tools 1, as we call it, is an internal ServiceNow instance. And it was the very first one that went to Raptor Pro. And
So 3 years ago, so in ServiceNow, we always eat our own dog food before giving it to our customers, always. And with Raptor was no difference, and we did it several times. So when we were confident enough with Raptor, and at that point it was not Raptor, it was not called Raptor yet, we decided, okay, now we can replace the old existing database with Raptor. And that was a project, took a while, downtime, because at this moment the migration was still more painful, more slow. And we did it with an instance internally that is called Build Tools 1, which is an instance used for all of our engineering to track, to do all the software development lifecycle. So to track tasks, stories, items, test results, pull requests. So this is used daily for thousands and
Mm-hmm.
thousands of engineers, project managers, product managers, leaders
Around the world, at all
around the
hours of the
world.
day.
Exactly. So it's used and it's impactful. Does not affect ServiceNow customers, but affects the organization very much. And a lot of planning. We went over it. We brought down build tools 1, the instance. We swept the databases. We restarted. Stuff worked. Everyone applauding. Works. After 1 day, after 2 days, after 3 days, it's stable. It's working phenomenally. It just works. It was like magic. Everyone, leadership, we're very happy. And then we start to get also the comments from colleagues from the org. Some of them were aware of Raptor at this point. Some were not. It's faster. Yeah, something has changed. It has become faster. It's snappier. So that was really great. And that was internally.
Yeah. Especially for,
Afterwards, last year, even before Knowledge, then is when we started to roll it up to roll out to our first early adopters. So we started to roll out. Took some convincing for them to get into it.
Of course.
And at that point, the process was much smoother. But after the migration, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days after migration, all the comments from the customers have been always great. It's faster. It's a rocket ship. It's CP. It's all kind of things. Having really a fantastic journey.
Sounds like it has a pretty good batting average.
Did you specifically look for customers with a lot of transactions, very large database footprint?
Yes, because so build tools 1 or internal instance is pretty large. It's maybe comparable to our top 100 or even top 50 with comparison with our customers. For our early adopters, and here early adopters of essentially Raptor Pro, that's really what we were interested on, we started to look from the top. So one of the first to migrate is our top 3 customer. So we really went for the hard ones because are the ones that will also see the most benefit. And we wanted to deliver. We wanted to deliver that improvement, and solve their problems as soon as possible.
They tend to be one of the most careful ones as well, right? Because they have just way too much to lose. So they can't afford any downtime or anything. So, and the database migration is a big deal. That's if you can convince those customers and deliver success there, I'm pretty sure it's much easier to convince others.
Yes, I think there's two things that really helped us there. One is that at ServiceNow we have a reputation that we really care. We are not 100% of the time doing everything right, but I would say we're 99 point something of the time doing things right. And when we don't, we're also honest enough to say, okay, we screw that up and we'll do everything in our power to make it right. That's point one. That builds trust over the years, right? And so whereas it would have been so much harder for us as being this tiny company, Swarm64, to approach customers like that and convince them to bank on us for their critical infrastructure. It's a totally different story if the team is 3 times the size, if there's ServiceNow behind it, and it's a clear commitment that's very specific and tightly integrated with the platform. That's part one. So there was a risk. The risk was lower than in many, many other cases. In fact, the risk is even lower than with any external software, because one of the things we can do is we have very, very fast turnaround times when something does go wrong. Whereas if you find an obscure bug with a vendor, that takes a lot of cycles. You need to go outside the organization. You need to first explain them. They may not be able to reproduce it. They may not be able to be allowed to access the data that actually produced the bug in the first place. All these things you shortcut, right? So that's one thing. It's like there's a very convincing story about ServiceNow working really hard to earn its trust from the customers. The second part is that there's a very, very clear gain. And that is in everything that's more complex, more reporting related, needs to crunch a lot of data, slice it and dice it, as I was talking about earlier. This is just something that the existing database was never designed to do. And so it was kind of an easy one to articulate, because it's like, yes, you have those things and you can get to a certain degree, but at your size, you yourself are noticing the limits.
Yes.
And here we go, and here's our proof point that we can overcome those limits. And that's kind of the two parts, right? There's an element of trust that's super important, and then there is an element of value that we could very clearly articulate.
Now, from a developer perspective, like you said, obviously this is kind of auto rolling out on its own. There's a smaller locus of control that developers have over this entity and this migration happening on their instances. But do you recommend any further education that can provide to developers or architects wanting to learn more about Raptor, or more so also wanting to learn more about the differences perhaps between the standard and pro editions?
So Raptor has a page in our documentation which describes the differences between Pro and Standard. At the moment, because Raptor is not exposed to a developer per se, there is not too much that the customer or the developers can exercise. But a recommendation will be that if you know that you are on Raptor, or do you want to go to Raptor, you might want to start to think differently on, or you might want to evaluate things that you have tried in the past for your company and think, okay, now we can try to do this cool project that before was not, we were not able to make it work because maybe the platform was timing out. Or maybe now is the time to reevaluate if we onboard a certain application. We might just want to onboard item, or we may just want to onboard vulnerability response, which we reevaluated 3 years ago and we were not happy with the results.
Wonderful. It's a nice opportunity. Not only do these new versions of ServiceNow present the opportunity to see all these new tool sets, but they also, like you said, allow people to retrospectively think about, what wasn't possible that is possible now. I like that as the kind of call to action here. Gentlemen, I know that this is something that, is a sticking point for a lot of the product teams I bring on this. I usually bring them on at times that we are debuting new versions of their software. And selfishly, I always still ask, under the umbrella of Safe Harbor, what's coming next? Can you give us any, tips or even some little surprises, perhaps, of what people can keep their eyes on for Raptor DB in the future?
So generally, we like to broaden the appeal because, right now, there is a very clearly articulated value at scale, but we wanna bring that everywhere. So we are constantly developing more features that make Raptor standard, but also specifically Raptor Pro, a lot more appealing across various use cases and across the farm. One example I can give, which is a very recent feature that has not been widely broadcast yet, but it is available. And if you're a Raptor Pro customer, you can talk with your account team to get that enabled. That is a text search acceleration. So when you have, for example, either you're searching yourself in fields, like we all know list views, and you say contains, right? And then you maybe have a piece of text and you want to see all the fields that containing that piece of text. Now, depending on the complexity of the query, that can actually be the lion's share of your execution for that list view. And that can make the difference between it's snappy or it takes a long time to go, for example, through all your config items. That is a Raptor Pro feature that this is now accelerated. But from a developer point of view, even more relevant, there may be certain things that you're doing or that things you're relying on are doing that use a similar feature. For example, let's say you're doing any acrobatics with sysclass path. That is, something where you may want to just find out is this snippet contained. When you do that, it's so much easier if you can have an index on it. So this is one example. Then if we look a little further into the future, I've been hinting at it a little bit. We want to take out the stops that keep you from the ability to put really large data sets into the ServiceNow platform. And one example is performance analytics and reporting that Luis was talking about earlier. If you do these snapshots, that means that you collect a ton of data. And that means you have to always work with data in a compressed fashion. And you have to think about, how do I make it that my data can continuously scale if I want to? But at the same time, how do you make the data really compact so it's not too much of a commercial burden? And this is why we're having a columnar table format that is coming out that allows you to keep very large sets of data, keep them compressed, and actually execute on them in compression, right? Like, so you can process a lot of data without even decompressing it, or you just decompress on the fly. It never gets stored in a decompressed fashion. So that's really nice when you have complex queries that require a lot of parallelism and a lot of data, and then you can truly crunch tens of terabytes or hundreds of terabytes. Or you can crunch, let's say, sub-terabyte data sets incredibly fast.
Wow, that is fascinating. That's so exciting. I cannot thank you all for both joining Laszlo and I here today to talk about this topic. It is so important, I think, for the future of developers to really be clued in on how this impacts, like you said, the backlog things that were stalled out years ago, as well as projects that they are interested in moving on in the future. So thank you for spending time with us here on Breakpoint here today to discuss this. Congratulations on this successful pathway of rolling out this database migration. I think it's remarkable how smooth and how amazing it's already adding to the ServiceNow community and the instances that have been on board for years and making them grow even to more powerful houses at these companies that they are being used by. Thank you for joining us here again today, wonderful listener. Breakpoint is one of the many ServiceNow podcasts that are produced by the ServiceNow company. You can find the other podcasts listed at ServiceNow Community's website. And this episode has been produced and hosted by both me, Lauren McManamon, as well as Laszlo Balla. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Stay hungry, stay humble, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Please let us know what you think about this podcast. You can leave feedback or ask questions in the ServiceNow community. For more great information on ServiceNow development, check out the ServiceNow developer portal at developer.servicenow.com. Thanks for listening.